No, I don't want to get. Let me get this real quick. Let me start the recording. John has joined us, and John, let me just introduce you to. Welcome to another episode of the NeoLiberal podcast. I am Renaldo McKenzie, and this is part 4 of the Castro v Trump series. And we have with us the main plaintiff and the gentleman himself, Mr. John Anthony Castro, the U.S. 2024 presidential candidate, president of AI Tax, president of Castro and Company, and of course, he's a legal scholar. And we're happy to have him. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we also have with us one of the founders and president of the Urban Indian Heritage Society, a very good brother of mine, my ADP, who helped to pledge me in Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, Mr. Dr. Nolan Fontaine. Welcome, sir.
It's an honor to be with y'all.
Yes, welcome. Yeah, man. How is the weekend? How are you guys?
Good.
Doing all right. Getting prepared for a super long weekend. 4th of July coming up.
Nice. And how have you been? Well, how have you been, John? How is it?
Yeah, that's coming up.
No,
I've been good. A lot has actually happened this week. A lot, but I'll jump into that right now when you're ready to delve in.
Yes. Of course, I said we have Dr. Nolan Fontaine. He's here with us. He has some questions for Mr. Castro, and so it's great to have him. So let's jump right into it. John, first question regarding Judge Cannon's recusal. Could you give us an update on that situation?
Yes. Yeah. So I met with some advisors that I regularly. There's very few people that I'll value their input and legal advice, but I have a small group of people I reach out to. So we started strategizing because it had already been 90 days. Judge Cannon hadn't ruled on the motion to dismiss, and so we had already we filed a writ of mandamus, and so we were asking the 11th Circuit to hold that she was usurping judicial power. So what usurping judicial power basically means is she's not doing her job, right? She's withholding judicial consideration and thereby effectively denying my constitutional right to seek redress of my grievances in the federal court system. So we filed that writ of mandamus with the 11th Circuit. We basically said, look, there's no good outcome for Trump here, right? If she says that the case is dismissed because I haven't stated a claim, then basically it argues that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is not self-executing, and so he doesn't have that defense to prosecution for January 6th. But if she allowed it to go forward, then she risks him being declared constitutionally ineligible. And if she held that I didn't have standing, she would have to directly contradict the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 9th Circuit and the D.C. Circuit and the 7th Circuit that have all said that a fellow primary candidate does have standing. We were all awaiting her judgment to basically see how is she going to try to craft a ruling here, that doesn't conflict with all this established precedent. And so at the same time, I started openly communicating to people that I was going to file a writ of certiorari with the U.S. Supreme Court regarding her recusal. Within 72 hours that I first texted in an email to members of the media, this Monday she issued a ruling.
Oh, wow.
So in her ruling, of course, she granted Trump's motion to dismiss, but all she said was one line, that I didn't have standing and therefore the court didn't have jurisdiction. No legal reasoning, no case citations, nothing. And normally a decision like this is going to be 7 to 10 pages, right? A judge wants to preserve their legal argument for appellate review. But her ruling was one sentence. It's ridiculous. In the legal world, I mean, if this was law school, you get an F. You'd probably get kicked out of law school, right? I mean, like you don't submit something like that. It's ridiculous. And so it's fine though. The issue is going to be reviewed de novo. So on Monday, I filed the notice of appeal to the 11th Circuit, and that's it. So now the case is going on the merits to the 11th Circuit. And we're asking the 11th Circuit to make a direct ruling, not to simply say, so we're not challenging the way she issued the ruling, because technically under the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, she doesn't have to cite a single court case on a dismissal. So it's not technically improper, but I think what she's thinking is that it's going to buy her time, that they might overturn the way that she dismissed it, and then give her a chance to rule on the merits, right? Which buys her another 90 days. But we're going to very strategically counter that by asking the court just review this de novo. We just determine whether or not I have standing, and if I do, remand it back down for now basically a case on the merits, or at least a determination of whether I've stated a claim. Which that might be her next thing, is like, okay, well, you have standing, but I don't think you've stated a claim. But if she says that, that officially negates Trump's criminal defense strategy for January 6th. So we will have gotten him if she falls into that trap. If she greenlights it and says, okay, fine, there is a claim, then that would probably be her best move, is to do that, but then say, I don't think January 6th was an insurrection. No jury or judge has held that it was, or that Trump aided or abetted or comforted any insurrectionists, and dismiss it on that basis. But now we'll have that case streamlined to the Supreme Court, while simultaneously Jack Smith may end up bringing an indictment for January 6th. We'll have to see. But yeah, we had some very, very substantive movement this week, starting on Monday. And yeah, the case has now been docketed. A case number has been assigned. So it's officially before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. We should have a ruling by the last day of September, which means we'll have the writ of certiorari filed before October 15th. There is also a secondary option where we can have this case before the 11th Circuit, and we can use Rule 14 of the Supreme Court rules to also do a concurrent writ of certiorari, which we're thinking we're probably going to do that. So on the recusal issue, because what we're going to be asking the Supreme Court is to mandate her recusal in all Trump-related cases, including the indictment in Southern Florida.
And let me just clarify. So as it relates to the recusal, she has not been recused, and she did provide a ruling on the case.
Correct. I mean, a ruling, but a one line pretty much stating that she didn't think that I had standing, and therefore the court doesn't have jurisdiction. And
right now you are appealing before the 11th Circuit Court, and you're appealing. Yeah. But there is also a case. You're also appealing the recusal.
No, so now because she's officially ruled in the case, all the issues that I brought up are now formally before the appellate court. Now, when I first, a writ of mandamus is when you think a judge is doing something improper in the middle of a case, you can try to get the appellate court to overturn the decision. So the first thing that she did was she didn't grant me electronic filing. So I argued that was a violation of my First Amendment rights. The second thing was that she refused to recuse herself. So I argued that she's already demonstrated extreme bias in favor of Trump, and that her recusal should be mandated. They ruled that I still had, because when you do a writ of mandamus, you're basically saying I have no other recourse other than to ask the appellate court to get involved. The appellate court, though, said that generally a judge's ruling, which, her intervention in the criminal case, can't be grounds for a recusal argument. And also they said, and technically you could just wait until this case is over and then appeal. So you still have alternative relief. So basically we'll address this on the full merits when she actually rules in the case. But then she didn't rule in the case. And so then I did a third writ of mandamus, and I said, hey, she's not ruling here. You guys need to do something. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, she issued the ruling on Monday. And so now all these issues are now 100% before the appellate court, and they have to decide everything. They have to decide, did the refusal to grant me electronic filing violate my First Amendment rights? Was her decision in the Trump criminal investigation, did that exhibit such extreme bias to warrant her mandatory recusal in all Trump-related cases? And in that one, Jack Smith has to be notified as an interested party because he's implicated. And then they also have to, well, no, the other issue is moot because she issued a ruling, so she didn't usurp judicial authority. So then the third one is going to be on the substance of the ruling itself, which is John Anthony Castro is a declared primary candidate. Does that grant him standing? And so the strongest argument for Trump's attorney, Lindsey Halligan, is going to be to argue that I have not filed the paperwork to appear on any state ballot. All I've done is filed with the Federal Election Commission, and that doesn't mean I'm a candidate. The problem is that flies in the face of the plain English definition of a candidate, which is any person that is pursuing a particular office. I have a website. I have a campaign infrastructure in place, and I have campaign finance reports. So it doesn't matter if I've raised $1 or $100 million. The point is that I'm saying I'm a candidate, therefore I'm a candidate. So I think on that one, we're going to easily win. The bigger question, so I actually have no doubt we're going to win, right? Like there's no question I have standing.
And this was part of your plan. This was part of your strategy. I think we were just waiting on a ruling. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So everything's going as planned. So I know that it's going to be overturned because, I mean, they'd be stretching judicial or legal logic to say I don't have standing. But that being said, the bigger question is going to be whether she has to recuse. And that is going to tee up a big fight, because if they again double down and they say no, it's going to contradict the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Lightkey v. U.S. So there was a case, Lightkey v. U.S. The Supreme Court already ruled on this. And they said generally, and again, they started generally, they said generally, a judge's rulings cannot serve as grounds to establish bias in favor of a particular person for purposes of recusal. But they said, unless that bias is so extreme that it is evident to all persons and it effectively denies a fair and impartial hearing. And that's exactly what we have here, right? The judge in this simple motion to dismiss, she took a total of 97 days. But in the Trump indictment, she wants to clear Trump so quickly that she had preliminary set the hearing to be August 14th. That's insane. That's in like 45 days. So she's willing to try to give Trump an expedited hearing, right? A whole thing, all the way to trial, everything, in 45 days. But it takes her 97 days to rule on my motion to dismiss. So this is more judicial activity where she's exhibiting such a gross and obvious degree of bias in favor of Trump, where even Jack Smith had to ask, like, hey, like, there's no way we can settle all the evidentiary issues and even schedule all the witnesses to appear in this court by that date. That's ridiculous. Like, he basically said it's an unrealistic time frame, and that's what that's a lawyer's basically way, a very nice lawyery way of saying this judge is batshit crazy. Like, there's no way you can put on a trial and prepare for that in 45 days. That's just outrageous. So it's going to be interesting.
And how does part of your case right now involved asking for a recusal of Judge Aileen on all cases related to Donald Trump? That means there is an indictment right now involving Donald Trump. How does that would be affected by the recusal?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if the 11th Circuit, let's say, ruled against us, even though they would be contradicting their own quotation of the Lightkey v. U.S. case, let's say it went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we already know how people are going to rule. I know Kavanaugh and Gorsuch are going to be on our side. So we got Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Roberts, and then the three liberals. We're solid. We have the 5 votes we needed. We know Alito and Thomas, right? They're going to vote against that, but we're confident that we have the votes on the Supreme Court to basically say that, you know what, we said in Lightkey v. U.S. that there may be a very, very rare instance where a judge's rulings can be so extreme to warrant recusal. This is that case. And if they issue the ruling in my case, that means she has to withdraw from all Trump cases, which means she gets kicked off the Trump indictment case, a new judge gets put on, and Trump is done.
Yes. And there's so much to talk about, but I know that Dr. Fontaine is here with us. You have some questions for Mr. Castro related to this case, but even beyond this case. So, Dr. Fontaine, welcome again to the show. And what are your questions for Mr. Castro? I think your mic is on. You're muted, actually.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Mr. Castro. Hi, Mr. McKenzie. Good to be amongst y'all. Give me just a moment. I'm just going to cue my questions real quick.
Yep.
The one question I have for you, Mr. Castro, I'm very intrigued with what you're doing. I'm an independent voter, so I'm just about getting the job done, right, as a veteran. So the one question I had was, looking at Gerald Horn, he has an interesting theory called imperialist bow out, where imperialist countries who are hemorrhaging revenue due to military expenditures exit or bow out of a specific military engagement. So what I noticed is that Trump had a very interesting je ne sais quoi in terms of pushing the administrative state leadership like John Bolton, right? Post, you know, I think that was Iran and everything with the General Soleimani strike. Trump had a very interesting je ne sais quoi at really pushing the administrative state, facilitating a troop withdrawal plan and peace talks, regarding endless wars and occupations. Whether we're looking at North Korea, whether we're looking at Germany, or whether we're looking at Afghanistan, it was at least put on the table. So with that soliloquy, Mr. Castro, what would your policy directives be and your troop withdrawal plan be for additional illegal wars in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa? And how do you specifically plan to cut military discretionary spending and institute proper oversight over the military budget 2024 if you're elected? Well, that will probably be 2025 because we'd be on the 2024 budget.
Yeah. So, what you brought up is really good. I'll get into detail exactly like what my philosophy is on that. With South Korea, I think there's a legitimate concern there. I mean, they're at a stalemate. The presence of our troops are, it's nuclear powers, right? So, I mean, I don't think there'll ever be a ground invasion, but I think it's kind of there just as a deterrent. I wouldn't want to withdraw because I wouldn't want to give an excuse or any sort of strategic advantage to the North of, possibly considering some sort of military action. And we would really need the troops there for readiness, admittedly, not just for North Korea, but I would say to a certain extent, North Korea is an excuse to have troops right next door to China. I think they are the bigger military threat. They're saber rattling a lot with regard to Taiwan. And they have absolutely no historical or justifiable claim over Taiwan. They never even exerted any sort of authority or power over it for a short period during the Civil War. Even before that, it belonged to Japan. So, but to a certain degree, I feel like that one's needed. The one that's not needed, at least in that particular area, is Germany. But now with everything that's going on with Russia, it kind of explains, why it's needed. But I would want to shift those. I would want to shut down the German bases and actually move them to Poland. I think Poland is also there's popular opposition in Germany to the U.S. bases is present. By the way, that's where I was actually born, was on a military base in Germany. But I would want to move those bases to either Poland or up north to our two newest members of NATO, the Baltic countries up there that are bordering with Russia. So I think there's definitely some need for restructuring and reallocation of some of those resources. The Middle East, I think we all know, the whole purpose behind the Middle East wars. It was oil, and I think what solves our involvement in the Middle East is the need for state-level involvement in renewable energy. We've tried to do it through private enterprise, and the thing is that the numbers just aren't there. It doesn't really make sense economically yet, like from a business profit perspective, especially because as soon as we started trying to get into it, China intentionally flooded the market with cheap solar panels, right, to drive down prices and basically bankrupt the green energy market in the United States. What is it? The Saudis have done the same thing as well. They control supply, so they can effectively control the price of oil worldwide. And so when they realized that, here in the US, we were developing new technology to extract our own oil because oil was getting too expensive, they essentially brought down the prices to again bankrupt U.S. businesses. They were innovating and coming up with new technologies. So as long as we have these external market manipulators, we have to outsmart them. And the only way we can do that is with an FDR style program, which is direct government involvement, right? But Republicans tend to oppose that because they're like, no, that's socialism, right? That's government involvement in the private market. But I'm like, yeah, guys, but it's from a national security strategical standpoint. And so we have to start viewing the same way we view Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics. We have to view our solar panel industry, our wind turbine industry, our hydroelectric dam industry, and we need to get more involved. So, that to me is, you solve the domestic production of energy issue, then we don't have to be involved in the Middle East anymore. I mean, we shouldn't at all, right? Like, we should never, I guess people say like, we should never go to war for natural resources, but I think that flies in the face of human history, right? I mean, we've always gone to war. There's scarcity of resources, we're going to fight for it, and then we're just always going to come up with some BS excuse to justify why we're there. Like, we're here for freedom. Like, no, we're not. So, but that's how I would solve that issue. Now, as far as any U.S. military intervention in Africa, I would say that there has to be popular support for it. But at the same time, the way that I view it is we're all evolving. We're all different stages, of governmental evolution. Yeah. And if we look back at our own history of the way, all the factions in Europe were constantly fighting, it would look like there was just endless wars right throughout, the 800 and 1300. It was just all of Europe was constantly at war. But that's how nation states develop, and that's how nation states emerge. And then states come together and they unify and they create blocks, and then eventually you have a more established nation. And so we're all going through this, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes it's our knee-jerk reaction is right away like U.S. military intervention, and I don't think that should always be the first resort. I think that there should be a closer look as to why this is happening more.
Right.
Facilitating negotiations, things of that nature. So
it's diplomacy strategies and things like that. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we also need to, as on the U.S. side, we need to evolve away from utilizing our intelligence agencies like the U.S. muscle to sort of enforce U.S. corporate wishes. We did that all throughout the 60s, right? I mean, like somebody took over a country, that's where all our bananas came from, and we just went in there and just, assassinated and replaced. And so it's just kind of like, we need to stop doing that. We need to find a way of, we can't be the ones saying like, oh, we want to create the United Nations and host the United Nations. And while we do everything to sabotage global peace and stability in our own backyard in South America and in Caribbean and Latin America. So we need to practice what we preach. We need to stop some of those, dirty tactics. And at the end of the day, does that mean that food prices and things are going to go up? Yes, but things will stabilize domestically as well. That means that we'll have to take a closer look at the minimum wage. We'll have to take a closer look at how we utilize tax credits like the earned income tax credit and child tax credit to redistribute wealth in the U.S. and, sort of level the playing field. But, all that to say that I agree with you. There are a lot of morally, legally unjustifiable military actions taken by the United States that unfortunately have left us with a bad reputation and a sour taste in the mouth of a lot of people that see that we simply don't practice what we preach. And I would definitely want to practice what we preach.
Wow, that's quite powerful. You have said quite.
I appreciate that, Mr. Castro.
Yeah, thank you so much. And were your questions answered? Do you have any more questions for Mr. Castro?
I just have one more question. I appreciate you answering.
But by the way, just before you ask that question, I remember some time ago, Hillary Clinton at the speech, and I have said this several times, she said that leadership at the center is softening. that was a very profound academic and powerful point. Leadership at the center was suffering, talking about how leadership, we're not thinking about leadership in terms of a pyramid, but more in a kind of a horizontal kind of a way. In terms of, we talk about communication is to make popular what was the monopoly, but we talk about US dominance in the world and US military intervention in the world. By the way, I'm so happy that Mr. Castro talked about tactics and the 1992 NAFTA agreement and how that displaced the Caribbean banana preferential agreement. That's quite powerful, and how structural adjustment had affected the people of the Caribbean. But at the same time, you alluded to the fact that we have to think strategically, and sometimes it's leadership that has to lead at the front. That is why China has some kind of advantage. Russia had advantage in the BRIC countries. In a sense, the governments are directly involved in terms of how they position their country strategically. Probably that was the US some years ago, but today, in a sense, there's a promotion on corporate bureaucracy and so on. But you have mentioned, so in a sense, you are thinking about that. And I've said that we need young leaders, people to start thinking in those ways. So I'm so happy that you would mention that. But what about what's going on in Russia and the Wagner? I think I published a report yesterday on the Wagner Group and how they are a private military company, and Russia is utilizing them in Africa right now. Well, I mean, so we talk about US in Africa, but what about Russia in Africa? That creates another dynamic. And so you question whether, and Russia in Afghanistan, and by the way, Statista has a data that shows the perception in terms of global leader perception, who they want. And I think China's perception as the next superpower is waning throughout their region. So, and they're looking for the US. So in a sense, it's kind of difficult what's going on in the world today. So as a leader, it will be difficult. How do you play with all of these dynamics and so on?
Yeah, that's the issue. Is I would say that this is always going to happen. And that was the concern under Trump. Because Trump wanted to be non-interventionist and sort of withdraw right from the international community and international involvement. But when you do that, it creates a power vacuum, and adversaries are going to view that as an opportunity to now step in and fill that vacuum. And that's why we need to stay involved. Like, we can't withdraw entirely, like if we're going to, if we should withdraw militarily, but then stay involved economically. And if not, China is starting to get more involved in a lot of South American countries, a lot of African countries as well, as they try to rebuild the ancient Silk Road. Using high-speed rails, but yeah, I would say that we have to start becoming more confrontational with Russia. They're becoming, well, not anymore because they kind of screwed up in Ukraine, but they were starting to become more globally assertive. A lot of people didn't know that they were in Syria. They were in Iran. They were helping to train Iranian and Iraqi resistance to American troops. So there were some Iranians dressing as Iraqis to go in and basically snipe and kill American soldiers. They took advantage of the situation basically to engage in a proxy war. The same thing, we're doing right now against Russia, except we're just doing it really openly, But yeah, Russia is thankfully now trapped in Ukraine, and that's really going to drain a lot of their resources. And so we should start seeing less and less involvement in other parts of the world as they start having to bring back home a lot of troops to try to salvage the mess that they started in Ukraine.
Yes. Dr. Fontaine, you have another question for Mr. Castro. I do want to ask him that question. You said you have, I know probably it has to do with the Urban Indian Heritage and the American Inclusion Act. I know that probably is one of the questions that you said, your position in this. I don't know if that's the question or you have another question for him, but go ahead.
It actually wasn't dealing with the American Indian Inclusion Act. However, since you threw that out there, I will add that as a tertiary question. But my secondary question was about selective service. And Mr. Castro, if you support selective service for women, or I guess the folks are saying nowadays individuals that identify as women. But during my time in the military, you know, that was something that kind of came up often, regarding women joining selective service. So I wanted to get your insight if you support that. Why or why not?
Yeah, so I do think that women should be permitted to sign up for selective service if they'd like to. I think it should be optional. I view it from a societal planning standpoint. The way that I see it is this: if you have 100,000 men and one female, your civilization is going to be over in 100 years. If you have one male and 100,000 females, there's still a chance for your civilization to survive. And so I don't view it from a military standpoint or anything other than simply a societal and biology planning standpoint, right, for reproductive purposes. But I do understand, and I've had female friends, and also when I was in basic training, there were females that could outrun me. And so I have a lot of respect for women in military service. And so I would say that if a particular woman wants to sign up for selective service, she should be permitted. But I personally, I wouldn't make it mandatory the way that I would for males, because of, again, the need for societal planning. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
And I have and by the way, recently I saw that you posted something about, is it the FBI and the DHS, and they're and we're going back to January 6th. Going back to January 6th, I wanted to bring that question up. You had tweeted or commented on the issue as it relates to FBI's and is it DHS knowledge of January 6th and their inability to act. But we've not heard of their involvement, and we have been talking about the Capitol Police and so on. But what accountability, what responsibility falls on the FBI? But can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just put it into perspective. The whole Wagner insurrection happened just less than a week ago, and already Putin has assembled a team to start analyzing how did all my generals respond when they heard that Wagner was on their way to Moscow. He's very, very curious to see, did they just say, well, let's see how this plays out? Or did they do like what the Chechens did? The Chechens immediately went to the bridge that the only access bridge to Moscow through the south, and they immediately occupied it when they heard Wagner's coming. So if you're Putin, what does that tell you? That tells you the Chechens are pretty damn loyal to you, right? I mean, they were quick to like occupy that bridge, and they were ready to confront the Wagner forces. But where the hell was everybody else? And so that is what Putin has now assembled an investigation team to start looking into. And if I was some of these guys that said, let me just take an early nap today and let's see how things play out tomorrow morning, I would start looking into getting a visa to go to Poland, because you're going to be arrested and executed very soon. So, but see, that's what you do after an attempted insurrection, is you identify who are the traitors. Yeah. Here in the US, we've done the exact opposite. It's kind of like, oh, coup failed. All right, well, maybe in 2024, let's just like cover this up and act like nothing happened. And it's like, what the hell? Like guys, this was an attempted coup. They wanted to overthrow the government. Yes. They tried to find a lawful way to do it. When they couldn't, they sent their people to start attacking the building, right? They had the guy with the zip ties and everything. It looked like they were ready to take hostages. And thank God there was a Capitol Police officer that opened up fire on one of them and killed one of the traitors. And luckily that sent shockwaves and everybody else decided to back down. But we could have seen that day end a lot differently if those insurrectionists had gotten through, if they had taken that gun away from that police officer, detained him as saying like, oh, he shot one of our people unjustifiably, and then held Congress hostage. Like, we have no idea how that would have turned out. And the fact that we're so willing to just act like it didn't happen is just beyond me. Ted Cruz exhibited a slight moment of humanistic honesty when he said the terrorists should be punished. And then he had to go on Fox News, Tucker Carlson, basically beg for forgiveness for telling the truth and saying like, oh, that's not what I meant. I'm so sorry. You know what I mean? Basically started saying that January 6th was just an honest, innocent, protest that got a little out of hand. And yeah, it's bizarre. And I see, and this unfortunately is something about Biden that I think he's trying to just heal the country. And the problem is that we made that same mistake after the Civil War. We gave way too much concessions to the enemy and the people that lost, and I see that same mistake, history repeating itself again, where he's not hunting down these people that turned a blind eye. There were people within the NSA, there were people within the NRO, the NSA, the CIA. They knew what was about to happen, and they did exactly what some of Putin's generals did. Let me just pretend I didn't see that and take an early nap and just see how things unfold tomorrow. And I think those people need to be treated like what they are, which is they're traitors to our American way of government. They knew of an impending crime and they did nothing, and that makes you an accomplice.
Wow, it's as if we're not learning from. By the way, the NBC News has a report out. The title, and I think I got this from your Twitter profile or Twitter feed. Planned in plain sight. Senate report. The Senate report finds intel agencies failed in the lead up to January 6th. And under that, it says the FBI and DHS. So this is not conspiracy. It says that the FBI and DHS downplayed the potential for violence, even as rioters openly planned to attack the Capitol online. Democrats on the Senate Homeland Security Committee found. So that is actually a report. What does, by the way, Dr. Fontaine, I know you have another question. Do you want to take that? But okay, he's not on. But I have one question for you as it relates to the 2024, and we have 5 minutes left, by the way. As it relates to the 2024 political landscape, what does it look like? I know that Donald Trump is the front runner. We talk about give us Jesus, but away with Barabbas. I've said that. But here it is that he is the front runner. What does that say about the GOP and the Republicans? And what is your expectations for 2024? I think President Biden has announced he's going to be running. There's DeSantis. You have so what is it shaping up to look like? And then comment, and we want to hear about your campaign for 2024.
Yeah. I mean, it's shaping up that if Jack Smith doesn't bring an indictment and secure a conviction for January 6th, and if my court case fails, then Donald Trump will secure the Republican nomination. He'll go toe-to-toe with Biden. And right now, with the way the economy is going, people underestimate how Americans will almost always vote their checkbook.
Yeah.
And if they're having to pay more for eggs and milk, they're willing to accept a little bit of fascism. And again, because at the end of the day, it's just like, hey, I'll accept a little bit of fascism if it means I have more discretionary income and I can go on vacation and finally see friends. And that is just, unfortunately, the God honest truth. Like, there are very few people that are very principled and willing to do things against their own self-interest in order for a bigger cause, and because they believe in something bigger than themselves. So it's a very real concern. And here's the thing. The Democrats are just as much to blame for this, because it was part of Hillary Clinton's plan that she wants Trump to be the nominee of the GOP again. And that's the reason why a lot of the mainstream media has not covered my story as extensively as you would think, because they don't want my case to be successful. Because if they had a chance to come onto this show, they would say, Renaldo, we want Trump to be the nominee of the GOP to expose the GOP for what it actually is, which is, it's become a bastion for hatred and fascism and all these things. And we would want that stigma to sort of prevail and stay on the GOP, because they're going to create a whole new generation of Democratic voters. The problem with that is that you're playing with fire, because if Trump gets into office, I've seen this all throughout history. I've studied history enough to know that he is going to burn everything down, and he's going to go after everybody, including me, everybody that opposed him. and you are going to slowly witness the downfall of the American empire. And yeah, it's going to be a very scary outcome. And they're not fully appreciating that they're playing with fire, and all the alarm bells should be going off right now. And a part of me sees that to a certain extent, I'm hoping it's not inevitable. I think our only hope right now is the Supreme Court intervening, and in my case, officially declaring Trump ineligible. But the way things are going right now, I'm not 100% sure. I'm really not. And so it really comes down to Gorsuch or Kavanaugh. I think it would be Gorsuch that would side with Roberts and 3 liberals and vote in our favor to declare Trump ineligible. But if they didn't, and Trump got into office, I really think that we are gonna, all the worst things we've always thought about Trump that we sort of saw a glimpse of on January 6th are going to come into existence. I mean, this is a man that's put up tweets openly making references to the purge, right? Like having 24 hours of open killing, lawful killing of all political enemies, rounding them up, sending them to Cuba to be blindfolded and put in solitary confinement in a prison setting. He's talked about this, and people are like, "Oh, he's just joking." No, he's not. He's really not. He's letting you see a side of him that comes off as facetious, but in reality, he's dead serious if he can get his way. So hopefully that doesn't come, but because none of us will be around to say that they were all wrong. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But like I said, I have my principles. I believe in American democracy, and so I'm willing to stand my ground and fight the good fight. You're on mute.
Oh, thank you. There's so much we can talk, because we talk about judges and how they play a role in holding people responsible. But we talk about balance of power. But you mean it's, Kant said history is a result of the varieties of human nature and circumstance. And we talk about the balance of power, but you cannot get rid of human subjectivity and human bias and human privilege and so on and so forth. And so therefore we have to put things into perspective when we come up with policies. And today, when you think about how judges are appointed, the connectionism between judges and political leaders and so on, and holding people accountable, that affects change, that affects progress. And here it is where you're trying to hold Donald Trump accountable. And of course, there are people who would go against you for doing that.
Yeah.
So, but we hope that Americans would wake up and understand the bigger picture. But by the way, Doc, just before we go, and we only have 2 minutes actually, maybe we're out of time. But Dr. Fontaine, I know you had one more question for him, but we don't have much time. But give us the quick question, a short version of the question. Let's see if Mr. Castro can answer in minutes.
Sure. So, Mr. Castro, I'm a part of Urban Indian Heritage Society. We're a group of misclassified American Indians who have been excluded from federally protected activities post 1968 Indian Civil Rights Act, Public Law 98204. So what we're garnering now is a petition to get congressional action for what we're calling the American Indian Inclusion Act, because there are a lot of folks, urban Indians who look like myself, who are excluded from that. So I just kind of wanted to get your insight if that's something as a candidate, as something that's a potential U.S. front runner, if that's something that you would be willing to sit down with us to discuss, during the campaign trail, and if you are elected.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can definitively say that I think we should honor our treaties. The United States signed a treaty with multiple Native American tribes, and I think that they've just been half-stepping this whole time about sovereignty, right? Like, are these Native American nations sovereign or not, and they kind of like, oh, it's like half, right? Like it's in between, and it's just like, no, man, it's either no or yes. There's no in between. I am all for 100% statehood. It should be recognized as a nation state. I would even support something similar to the United Native Tribes of America, and it creating its own political system where all the tribes come together. And it should be viewed as sovereign territory. If I enter onto a Native American territory, it's as though I just stepped into Canada or, Lithuania. It's a separate country, and it needs to be respected as that. But yeah, the disrespect and the lack of honoring the treaties is definitely deeply upsetting and not in accordance with American policy, and it should be respected. We've had less formal agreements respected, right? I mean, like we promised to never invade Cuba. That was literally just a verbal agreement between Kennedy and Castro. It's still honored to this day. I mean, to a certain degree, right? I mean, we still send in CIA to burn crops once in a while, but, but I mean, like, we haven't invaded. So we've kept that word, and we haven't kept our word with the Native American tribes. And I would definitely support full statehood and even representation in the United Nations as a nation state. It needs to be respected.
Wow, this is quite powerful. There's so much that can be said. This is powerful, but we are completely out of time. The plan was to discuss 30 to 45 minutes. But I just want to thank you guys. But we have to come back, talk some more about some other issues. Talk about the issue of the Indian Heritage Society. You have said so much in that state response, Mr. Castro. What's coming up for your campaign? I know the plan was to actually do something for the New Hampshire primaries come around. What's coming up? Just remind us, and of course we can get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now the big focus is on the litigation side. I do need to have not need to, but want to have more substantive involvement in New Hampshire. So I'm going to be heading out there the second week of July, and I'm going to be meeting with a number of state representatives and local elected officials. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build effectively what sometimes is referred to as a rainbow coalition of anti-Trump Republicans as well as conservative Democrats. And I'm going to try to build that coalition to have a decent performance in the New Hampshire primaries. And if we can have a breakout performance there, it's going to set the tone for the rest of the campaign. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what I've made clear, and I'm publicizing my intentions here, is I'm going all the way, all 50 states. Most people drop out after Super Tuesday, right? Because they run out of funds. The reason I'm staying in the race is because a lot of people said, look, if you stay in the race, you're probably going to only get 3 to 5% in every state thereafter, right? I mean, it's negligible. Yeah, it's negligible in a primary election, but not in a general election. In a general election, Wisconsin turned on 1.3%. Michigan turned on 2.1%. Pennsylvania turned on 2.1%. So, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, 3% becomes very relevant, right? In a primary election, you're a joke. In the general election, all of a sudden it's, oh crap, that guy controls 3% of Republicans. Like, we need that, because if I decide to form a group called Biden Republicans, and I say, well, you know what, maybe I'll just take my entire block and we'll go to the Democratic National Convention and I'll publicly endorse President Biden for re-election, guess what? Republican chance of victory just plummeted dramatically. So yeah, I mean, I probably foresee that as the direction that it's going, and I'm going to be open about that in New Hampshire when I talk to her.
I think we just lost. I think we lost Mr. Castro. We lost Mr. Castro, unfortunately. We just lost him. We're about to wrap up. That's powerful. I wanted to hear the response. And I wanted to ask him real quickly about President Biden, and but he made the mention about what's going on economically in the U.S. And what he, and to be honest, when you look at what's going on in the U.S., what support is there for the incumbent? What support is there for President Biden? I mean, sorry, yeah, for Mr. Biden. And it, and under Trump, many people said that things were okay, and people are thinking more about their livelihood than about anything else. Yes.
Mhm.
So I don't know what to
Absolutely. Yeah,
but
thank you, Mr. Castro, man. That had to get off the loss of him.
yes, I don't know
But
what happened, but
it was a pleasure meeting and discussing and sharing the electronic space with him.
yes,
While I don't agree with everything, I not a political purist, and you know what he brings to the political arena is definitely needed
yes,
in this time and space that we're going through such a politically tumultuous time, leading up to these presidential elections. So,
yes.
you know, I'm just glad that he was willing to, at minimum, answer some of the questions because nowadays we don't even really have too many political candidates,
Yeah,
presidential candidates that want to answer the question. So
and
kudos to him on that.
that is true. And I want to thank you. I appreciate you coming to participate in the Castro v. Trump. I hope you'll be back
No
for
problem.
part 5, and we will follow this particular lawsuit with Castro versus Trump all the way to the Supreme Court. We will continue to follow, and he is back. Sorry, we lost you.
Oh, Mr. Castro.
Yes, you were wrapping up. You were talking about, you were at the end of talking about what's next for your campaign.
He might still be connecting the audio.
Yes, his audio is still connecting.
Mhm.
But he's joining us. He was wrapping up, but I'm not sure what happened. But we lost him just for a minute. Maybe I need to bring him back in the room. Okay, everything should be good. I think he's slowly coming on, and he's back, and he can unmute now.
Yeah, there we go.
There we Yes, you were wrapping up talking about the campaign, and you have the final word. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty much what I said, that the reason I want to go all 50 states is so that I get that name recognition I need in all 50 states, and really bring in that anti-Trump base, because there's about, I'd say, 7 to 12% of Republicans that would reluctantly vote for Trump if there's nobody out there being the anti-Trump champion, the one that's highlighting all of their fears and concerns that they have about his rhetoric and stuff like that. And so if I'm out there being that sort of lightning rod that they can come to, then yeah, we can build that block, and then it basically deny Trump re-election in the general election. So on top of the fact that we're going to undercut him and get him kicked off the ballot in several states. Several states are already in the bag, like Arizona's in the bag, Pennsylvania's in the bag. So his path to 270 is getting tighter and tighter. And so yeah, I think there's a very real possibility that under normal circumstances he would probably win re-election, but by getting him kicked off the ballot in key states and building that anti-Trump block, that we can deny him a re-election.
Thank you so much. That is Mr. John Anthony Castro, the main plaintiff for the John Castro versus Donald Trump lawsuit. And we are happy that we could provide this opportunity for him to come and share with us and to discuss what's going on with that case. And we are going to, and earlier I said, we're going to follow this all the way to the Supreme Court. All the way to the Supreme Court. Now, if you want to get in, if you want to get a hold of Mr. Castro, get involved, yes, you can reach out to him at he's on Twitter, Real John Castro with Twitter handle.
Yeah, Real John A. Castro, yeah.
Real John A. Castro, yes. And he's on LinkedIn on with his John A. Castro. He's on Facebook. He's on, and of course, you can visit his website, which is johncastro.com.
Yeah.
And he will respond. And of course, we thank Dr. Fontaine, who is the president of the Urban Indian Heritage Society. And of course, he'll be back with us. Mr. Fontaine, thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate sharing the space with both of y'all.
Yeah, man. And of course, Yeah, man. Thank you, guys. And this is the NeoLiberal Realm podcast. Join us for part 5 of the Castro v. Trump series later on. And of course, continue to support us, continue to visit us at RenaldoCMcKenzie.com and theneoliberal.com. We are all about serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges. By doing what? By making popular what was the monopoly. Visit us at anchor.fm/theneoliberal. And by the way, I don't think it's anchor.fm. We've changed our name. We're now with Spotify and it doesn't roll off my tongue. So, but if you type in anchor.fm/theneoliberal, you'll still get us. But we are on over 12 channels and in 36 different countries. But thank you guys so much for supporting us. We are growing and we continue to do so. What good.